Welcome to my channel.
In a house built on bloodlines, one boy was born to be forgotten. Magic, that single word, blazed through my memory like a crown of light splitting open a dark sky. They called it a power so vast and luminous it could only be a fingerprint left by a god, something no ordinary mortal hand could have fashioned. Mage swordsmen were rare enough, 1 in 1,000, but a true mage, someone who could bend the world's hidden current with bare will alone, appeared only once in 10,000 souls. And yet, for the first time in the long and blood-soaked history of the Barrial Empire, such a man had risen. That man, gifted with magic, marked by fate, had ascended to emperor while still young. These golden eyes of mine had once burned with the conviction that my rise would crack open a new age for every mage who had ever been looked down upon. But that dream now felt very far away. Torchlight outside the barred walls threw long shadows across cold stone, and the reality of where I was settled over me, somewhere I should never have been brought.
What is so remarkable about magic truly? It has always been the refuge of the lesser-born, a crutch for inferior souls who have nothing else to claim. That great power of yours means nothing right now, does it? These restraints have swallowed every spell you possess. You are completely, utterly helpless. Isn't that so?
My hair lay across cracked stone, and I felt the enchanted chains biting into my wrists. Somewhere distant, a child's voice cried out a name, raw and desperate, as though they could not believe any of this was real. I lifted my gaze from the floor, dirt and blood smeared across my face, and met the brother's eyes with the one thing he hadn't managed to chain, the cold, unbroken smolder still alive behind mine. The brother crouched over me wearing that familiar half-smile, his next words arriving slowly. Each syllable savored the way a man savors a meal he has spent years waiting to eat. He reminded me of what he used to say when we were children, that mages were peasant-born creatures, and that if anyone in the household ever learned what I was, I would be cast out without a second thought. I had believed, back then, that he was warning me out of brotherly concern. Now I understood otherwise. A memory surfaced unbidden. A portrait on a wall, a small boy pressed close against a man's side, and a voice whispering that I must hide it, that the power inside me was something the world was not ready to see. The household had called that man Uncle Ian. The truth settled over me like cold iron. The brother had never despised magic because it was beneath him. He had despised it because he had always, quietly and desperately, wanted it for himself, and I was the one who had it. Whatever restraint the brother still possessed finally broke. He seized me and drove me hard against the stone, rage splitting his expression open, every trace of careful contempt gone, and nothing remaining but raw, naked fury.
None of that matters now, none of it. What matters is that I am the one standing over you, and you are the one on the floor with nowhere left to go. And you are groveling at my feet. He drew his blade with a slow, deliberate rasp, holding it aloft as though the act were a mercy rather than murder, and told me that because we shared blood, he intended to be generous. His boot pressed down near my head, the sword's edge filling my vision, and his voice softened almost to gentleness as he promised my death would be quick.
Then rapid footsteps, echoing down the torchlit corridor outside, and a voice cutting through the darkness, urgent and breathless.
His eyes flicked toward the sound, irritation pulling tight across his jaw, and he snapped at whoever had dared interrupt him. What was it?
He turned away from me, just a fraction, his back angling toward the cell bars. And in that small, stolen shift, I caught the first hairline crack opening in his certainty. His heel came down hard beside my skull, a final, wordless declaration of where he believed I belonged. I lay still, blood matting my hair against the cold floor, staring at nothing and letting the pain exist without swallowing me. Because beneath it, something older and quieter was already beginning to stir. And yet, even there at the end, a strange calm had settled over me, the calm of a man who had poured out every last drop of himself, leaving nothing in reserve, nothing unsaid. The thought arrived quietly, almost tender amid the roar of flames licking the edges of my vision, that perhaps someone, somewhere, would one day remember the name Ian Veroshian, and then even that fragile hope dissolved into the blinding light before it could fully form. "Your Majesty!" The cry cut through stone and smoke alike, raw with terror, and my mage companion's face burst into the dim space above me, eyes wide and desperate. Warm hands caught my shoulders before I could sink back to the floor, and I found myself staring up at a face that was bruised, breathless, but unmistakably present. My mage companion, here, against all reason. A single word pressed itself out of me, barely a whisper, "Stop." "It was because of someone that you became a mage at all," my mage companion said. "And because of that, you rose to become emperor." Each word falling between us like a stone dropped into still water, sending out slow, widening rings. Tears were running down my face before I even understood I was crying. I didn't wipe them away. I simply looked up, blood-smeared and undone, and admitted the thing I had never once let myself say aloud. I wanted to let go now. "Do you remember, Your Majesty?" my mage companion asked, voice dropping to something almost reverent, as though the question itself were a key turning in a long rusted lock. A vision surfaced, the separate annex of the magic branch, pale and luminous beside the secondary imperial palace, its domed roof catching starlight, a place I had nearly convinced myself I'd dreamed. "You used to slip away in there when the weight of everything became unbearable," my mage companion said softly, "and cry where no one could find you." In the memory, a younger version of me sat cross-legged on the annex floor, while my mage companion leaned in the doorway amid shelves of ancient records, saying that if I truly went to that building, truly, I would be given another chance. "I still don't know why it had to be that place exactly," my mage companion admitted, raising one finger with that familiar wry gravity, "but I believe that is a question only you will ever be able to answer." My mage companion pulled back just enough to meet my eyes, voice soft but certain, telling me that whatever lay ahead was something only I could navigate from here. And then the world split open in a blaze of golden light.
A vast magic circle erupted beneath us, its constellations blazing across the floor in spinning rings of light, and my mage companion pulled me into the heart of that radiance. Somewhere above, the brother's furious voice cracked like a whip, demanding to know what we thought we were doing.
Then came a single thunderous impact, a concussive crack that swallowed every other sound. Through the ringing in my skull, I saw a hand, my mage companion's hand, pressed to the center of a blood-red seal carved into the floor, fingertips glowing where blood met rune, the circle drinking it in with a shuddering crackle of released power. Something surged back into my body, sensation, fury, the heat of my own pulse, and I heard myself shouting before I'd decided to speak. The restraint spell had to come down, right now, this instant. My mage companion glanced back at me, face pale but composed, and said simply that it was already too late to stop. The blood price had been paid, and the seal was already turning. A bolt of forbidden dark energy screamed across the air in a savage arc, and I heard my own voice roar that I had known, had always known. Those treacherous wretches would try exactly this.
The brother staggered at the blazing edge of the circle, shrieking at my mage companion to explain what was happening. And beneath that noise, beneath all of it, my mage companion's voice reached me quietly, urging me to hold fast to everything I had just remembered.
A blade flashed down in a savage arc above me, but I had already steadied myself. And when I raised my eyes, there was nothing left in them of the boy who had wept alone in a dusty annex. My mage companion's voice reached me through the roar of the shattering seal. That Providence does not set before us questions it has left unanswerable. And then the blood-drawn circle detonated in a crushing wave of crimson force. Providence, I nearly laughed, spitting blood from my lip as the shockwave tore through me. Providence could keep its philosophy. What I needed right now was to survive the next 10 seconds. The light settled into something vast and golden, a full magic array unfurling beneath me like a second sky, and through it all I heard my mage companion speak. Not a title, not a rank, simply. Ian.
A blade hung above me, my brother's sword, slicked with blood, its tip blazing white in the surging light, and his voice descended with it like a decree. Pray, he told me, that you are never born again.
The floor beneath me was a ruin of red, my own blood, spread wide and dark as a verdict, and his grip on the hilt never once wavered. Then, cutting through the cold certainty of that raised blade, my mage companion's voice rose from somewhere beyond the violence, gentle, urgent, a thread of starlight through black water, pleading with me not to forget. The magic array detonated outward around my mage companion's staff, shards of the broken restraint spell spinning away like shattered glass into the blue surge of the circle. And through the chaos came the tail end of the words. Your Majesty, the voice said, God sets no problem before us. That has no answer. The restraint shattered with a sound like a cathedral cracking in half, and through the fracture I saw my brother's face, gold hair, a thin smile he couldn't quite suppress, watching the spell collapse around him. 3 images stacked in the breaking light. My brother above, still composed, still calculating. My mage companion in the middle, spent and fading but holding ground. And me at the bottom, chains dissolving from my wrists, eyes finally opening. A shard of the shattered spell caught my reflection as it fell, my own face suspended in the fragment, calm in a way I hadn't felt in years. And below it, the golden light tore open like a wound in the floor, brilliant and absolute. I rose from one knee, my hair lifting on the surge of released magic, golden threads of power stitching across my waist and arms, not violent, not frantic, just mine, wholly and unmistakably mine again. The world beyond the palace windows answered, clouds splitting, birds scattering from the tree line, light pouring down over the distant forest, as though the sky itself had registered that something had irrevocably changed. The imperial palace stood exactly as it always had: manicured lawns, a red-carpeted stair, every stone declaring permanence and order, utterly indifferent to the reckoning unfolding inside its walls. A single character bloomed against gray nothing, ink dark, brushstroke bold, the kind of mark a hand makes when it signs something it cannot ever take back.
And then my name, not a title, not a threat, just Ian, screamed from somewhere above me with a fury that seemed to rattle the chandelier and every gilded cornice in that merciless hall. The memory surfaced like a bruise, a younger version of my brother looming over someone crumpled on a gleaming floor, his voice cracking with contempt. Can't you even walk straight? He demanded. Get up, right now.
A woman laughed softly beside him, while a small red-haired boy stood rigid with shame, and somewhere nearby a voice carried the casual cruelty of those who believe their pity is a gift. They had taken this child in out of charity, they said, because of his low-born mother, and there was nothing about him worth loving.
The woman tilted her head, amused, and my brother's voice cut through again, dry, almost mocking, asking whether that meant the man still considered the boy his son at all.
And from the floor, small fingers pressed against cold marble, a child's thought rose through the noise. Who are these people? My head already aches, and they won't stop being so loud. A child's gaze drifted upward, that same chandelier, those same gilded arches, and the single bewildered question that filled the whole ceiling above him was simply, "Where am I?" Small, trembling hands gripped the hem of a dark sleeve to steady themselves, while the same thought repeated beneath the noise like a heartbeat. Who are these people? The boy turned, and framed in a doorway like a painting, stood a young blonde figure in formal black, flanked by the woman and my brother, the child seeing all three of them properly for the very first time. Green eyes, sharp, startled, snapped wide open. Whatever the boy had expected to find when he looked up, it was not this. From where my brother stood, Ian would have appeared as nothing more than an unfamiliar silhouette, and the question forming in that moment was cold and simple. Who is this boy?
My brother's jaw tightened as he spoke in a low, controlled hiss. Stop shaming your father. Compose yourself before Sir Malin, because a good impression now would carry word all the way to the Emperor's ear and make the family register entry go without a hitch.
The Emperor, that phrase landed on Ian like something foreign, something belonging to an entirely different world, and he looked up at my brother with those steady green eyes and a single bewildered question hanging between them. The Emperor, me. My brother exhaled, long, deliberate, while across the split frame a hooded figure bowed low, hands clasped over what he was presenting. The Emperor's edict, he announced, and the words settled with the quiet, irrevocable weight of something decided long before anyone had thought to tell me. The hooded figure thrust the document toward me as though reading were a courtesy I didn't deserve, and I stared at it with wide, bewildered eyes, because none of this made sense. An edict? I hadn't issued any edict. I didn't even know what that meant yet. Then something on the parchment snagged my attention, a date, inked neatly in the lower corner, and my eye locked onto it, my whole body going rigid with a flinch I couldn't suppress. 98 years ago. The seal was genuine, the script flowing and authoritative, the gold emblem unmistakable, and the number beneath it was impossible, a date that predated not just my birth, but my mother's and her mother's before her. Someone had written this long before I ever existed.